see something else based on the motion in clockwise direction. Now, the interesting part is that this zodiac belt actually moves at a rate of 1 degree in 72 years. So that means if now you're standing on Earth here and you are able to observe Gemini directly, after 72 years, slightly it will shift to the other direction by 1 degree. And if you wait for total 360 degrees to happen, that means it will be 360 into 72, that is 25,920 years when it will come back after a full circle to the same position. So that is one important aspect we should keep at the back of our mind. This particular number 25920, 25,920, and we'll come back to that. Now, apart from this, there is a very important phenomenon which is happening, which is very less known or maybe known, that our movement of our planets and Earth is actually not kind of really heliocentric or circular. It's kind of a spiral movement. Now, in the next slide, let's watch a quick video animation which provides us this idea of what's happening. So here we clearly see that the motion of the planets is actually in a spherical vortex kind of a manner, but it's all around the sun, and sun is the center. And we also see here that the sun seems to be going in a straight line. But just imagine if there is a very big infinite circle, infinite to our understanding and comprehension, then we may see the circumference of the circle as a straight line and we will not understand. But this sun is also seems to be going around another center. Could be this center is the center of another sun, or it could be the center of the universe, or it could be an unknown center, the center of all, and could be akin to the central spiritual sun. So just keep these ideas in mind when we proceed to the next slide. Now here we see the idea of Earth's orbital motion. So the Earth is actually tilted at a degree 23.4 from the north ecliptical pole, which is also known as NEP. So if there is a sphere and you cut a line through the center and the tilt is pointing to the Polaris pole star or the North Star, there is a 23.4 degree tilt. And when Earth is moving around the sun, this tilt is always there, almost similar. But because of this motion, we know how it impacts the seasons, and it impacts the various astronomical phenomena, especially the sun and the moon, the lunar eclipses, solar eclipses, and the solstice and the equinox. The important point to keep in mind is just very simple, that the solstices are the longest and shortest days of the year, while the equinox occur when the day and night are almost equal, of the equal length. Because this is a eclipse, you have the shorter radius and the longer radius, and depending on that, this phenomena is happening. The other aspect of this is, if we see the sun's rays. Now, one part of the earth is getting shadow here, other is getting sun ray here in a summer solstice, and the same part is getting actually the shadow in a winter solstice. So this gives more better perspective. Similarly, in the case of solstice, you have the solstice path in summer going in this manner, in equinox it's going in this manner, and winter solstice. So this again, as an observer, you will get an idea how these paths are consistent and maintained throughout the cycles. So the other aspect, as we discussed, is the weather, which keeps changing because of this phenomenon. An important aspect which we need to keep in mind is that the range of Earth's tilt varies from 22.1 degrees to 24.5 maximum. And because of this variance, the astronomical events which we see every year or cyclically, they are not exactly on the same date in the year. They may vary one day here or so. So that's an important fact. Now, this picture is from NASA, wherein it says that after the Big Bang expansion, the whole universe is expanding. So just imagine that we are one dot here, and each dot is, let's say, equal to, let's say, galaxy in the Milky Way. And in that, another small micro dot is there, which is maybe our solar system. So we saw how the planets are going around the sun, and we saw how the zodiac belt is there. And then imagine that all happening in this big dumbbell shaped like space where we are. And this can be compared again to our secret doctrine page 200 diagram, where the source of all this could be the Laya center, which is on top of the triangle, the apex. But this is just trying to give a conceptual idea of what's happening to our solar system and where we are in the whole context of these things. Now, the sun and the moon govern many astronomical events which are connected with our life and various other planetary events. So let us see how the ancients have faithfully captured and they have followed the ancient mysteries in their temples and holy places, and how they have connected everything with the movement of sun, the moon, the planets, and their motion. So in the next slide, what we are seeing here is Aubrey, which is part of the Stonehenge. Now, Stonehenge is basically a World Heritage Site, which is a megalith monument. And Aubrey is famed as the largest prehistoric stone circle in the world. Now, you can see the structure here on the right-hand side. And there are 4 red dots here. These red dots are known as the station stones, which were set up as markers, and this entire site is actually 2500 BCE old. So the site's orientation is to mid-winter sunset, midsummer sunrise, and it also aligns to several major lunar events. And it is said that various ancient mysteries and ancient rites were conducted in this area. Then this is the same site, but you can see that surprisingly and very efficiently they have aligned it to most of the events, astronomical events, both the solstice and the equinox, and at the same time for the midsummer and the midwinter. Next, even the lunar events are very accurately aligned with the Stonehenge. So the pagans, the Celtic, the Druids used to perform a lot of ceremonies based on the lunar events at these sites. Again, we have Karnak from Egypt, And Karnak, you can see on the left hand side here, these are the ruins of Karnak. But the interesting part is perfectly aligned with the summer solstice sunset and the winter solstice sunrise. So this is a straight line, how it's aligned. Another area is the Najra. Now, Najra is actually a combination of three temples. You can see here there is one small temple, the bigger temple in the center, and the third temple on the right. Now, the temple complex is located on the southern coast of the island of Malta and is composed of three adjoining temples. The southern temple, which you are seeing highlighted here, this southern temple is actually very important because this temple complex is aligned to the sunrise and sunset at winter and summer solstice. So you can see the winter solstice sun goes in this section and the summer solstice rays go in this section. But when equinox happens, it directly hits the central altar, the sunlight directly hits that, and it seems it's quite beautiful view when this event happens. Next is an interesting Nebra Disk. Now, this disk was found in Germany, and this is actually a bronze disk which has symbols of sun, full moon, lunar crescent, and also the constellation of Pleiades. And it was found in an area known as Nebra in Saxon-Anhalt in Germany. And the archaeologists say that it is 1600 BC old. It seems that this disk was used as a reference, as a blueprint, sort of to create the Gosex circle, which you are seeing now. Now, this Gosex circle is actually created with the help of some wooden fences, and it is a Neolithic structure which actually copies the Nebra disk, which we just saw, and faithfully has holes in the fences so that the winter sunset and mid-winter sunrise can focus in the exact center of this circle. And they have a northern entrance here, which is on the top if you see this particular entrance. At this particular entrance in the northern side, no one knows what's the purpose of that. But when the sunlight comes, it comes through these two openings only. And then we have interesting location known as the Machu Picchu, which you all must be aware of, which is in Mexico, the Mexican Peruvian Andes. And it's nearly 8,000 feet high. It's based and developed and built on the Inca style. Now, there are various alignments. If you see the structure here, it's quite huge. There are various alignments which are happening here based on the celestial astronomical events. But one of the interesting one is the sun's tethering post, which is on the left hand side, this one. Now, the event which happens on summer solstice, you can see the sun which is set behind the mountain. So the sun is set behind the mountain and the light and shadow is cast here. And they say that this is associated with crop and the livestock fertility. Again, in the mausoleum, somewhere here, there is a natural cave formation around which the entire structure or structures have been formed, which are actually aligned to the sunrise of winter, that is June solstice. And next we have the Chaco Canyon. Now, Chaco Canyon is actually located in northwestern New Mexico. Around 2900 BC it was formed. And these structures, there are many structures if you see here, which are actually all astronomically aligned to solar, lunar events, solstice and equinox. The largest is the one which we have mentioned on the right hand side, the Pueblo Bonito, and which accurately is aligned to all of these astronomical events. But apart from this structure, there are many around this area which were actually developed by the early Mexicans. Now, in this same area, in the Chaco area, you have in the same Chaco Canyon, you have the Sun Dagger. This is a very interesting site. Here you see there are 3 or 4 vertical rocks. Now they are actually rocks which are standing, rocks cut by some ancient technology and placed vertically. And here you see the sunlight actually goes via these rocks. Now behind these rocks, there is another rock, which is the part of this hill or this big boulder, wherein these spiral engravings are made. Now, depending on whether it's an equinox solstice or the fall equinox or the winter solstice, the light falls around these engravings. So here you see a bright light on the right side, which means a spring equinox, and a dull shadow in the center means summer solstice. Again, bright light on the other side is a fall equinox, and when there are 2 bright lights on the circumference of this spiral, you get the winter solstice. So this seems probably like a solstice and equinox clock which the ancient had developed for this particular region. Next, we have Zebel Shalton. This is very interesting. It is part of the Yucatan area in Mexico. There are 8,000 structures here. This is 500 BCE old, and this is a temple of 7 dolls. And maybe the 7 dolls are also connected to the 7 primordial Buddhas. And they say that exactly at the time of equinoxes, both equinoxes, you have a bright blazing sun which passes through the temple, and you can see the picture here. And then we have a similar structure in Yucatan, which is also aligned to similar astronomical events. And this is known as the Temple of Masks. And finally, a very interesting structure is at Chichen Itza. Now, what happens is here, it's roughly 65 kilometers from Yucatan, and this is the Kukulkan Pyramid. Kukulkan Pyramid. And when the solar alignments happen, we see the equinoctial lights actually take effect, and they are shown on the western face of the northern staircase. So this is the western face of the northern staircase. And here we can see the serpent deity in the form of a shadow cast rippling. So this is the shadow cast rippling down the western face of the northern staircase. And you can see the alignments here. And next, similarly, we have in Teotihuacan, you have the sun temple here, and you are looking from the moon temple, and this is the avenue of the dead, and all these areas are again aligned together. Now, apart from this, the ancients had many things revolving around the zodiac. And if we see, there is in Egypt a very famous temple of Hathor, and this temple is the Dendra temple of Hathor. Now, Hathor was a goddess, and here you see the zodiacal circle, which was captured by the ancient Egyptians. Now, this area is actually 50 kilometers off Karnak, and the temple of Hathor, where Hathor is the goddess, is believed to assist the deceased soul in afterlife. And she is a sky goddess who also assists Ra, the sun god, in daily rebirth. And she had an important part in ancient Egypt afterlife beliefs, according to which the deceased humans were reborn like a sun god. Now, this, if we see from the occult perspective, we may also relate to the event of second born or Dvija, which is known as in Hindi or Indian language. The details of this is captured in the Hathor temple in the hieroglyphics as mentioned here. This one particularly captures about the journey of the neophyte to the other world and back. And then this one also illustrates the same thing. And then finally, we have 12 towers inside the temple. You see these towers, the images from bottom up. On the top of the tower, you have the image of Hathor, the goddess. And there are 4 faces which are looking in the 4 cardinal directions. And then you have the solar god, which is part of the mysteries, which is captured in this temple. Now, here the sun is the central part of all the Egyptian rituals. Now, if you see, there are 10 rays coming from the sun here, but actually in other places there are 5, 10, 14, 21, and 49 rays, which may have a different meaning. At the same time, the Egyptians actually followed a very high god, which they call the Thoth. Now, Thoth is the god with Anubis head, which you are seeing here. And Thoth is also the god of equilibrium and considered as the master of balance. He is also associated with the precession of equinoxes because the time of day and night were balanced. And thought is also related to thought Hermes. It is the emblem of secret wisdom, connected with solar god, the dragon. And also, if we see the glossary, we can understand more about it. How thought Hermes is also connected with Lord Ganesha. In fact, it's similar. If you see, there's a tusk and the story is similar. So here, the Hermes thought, and there's another form, is connected with moon. And when the thought god or thought Hermes wears the ibis head like here he's wearing, he becomes the scribe. Now, scribes we know is also connected with the Lipikas. But when he wears the crown of a lunar disk, he becomes a mysterious god. And again, he is connected with different phases of the sun and the moon. And that's how the Egyptians used to worship. But let's not forget that these are all actually not there's no person sitting there with such kind of a face, or there's no god sitting there with such kind of a face. These are actually all forces of nature which are represented like this. And we should not anthropomorphize the same. Now, the astronomical events actually are based on the ancients, are connected to the ancient mysteries of initiation, and all are especially connected with solstice and equinox. Now, as we have already seen in the starting of our discussion, there are 4 turning points of the year: the solstice of winter and summer, the equinox of spring and autumn. So the cycle of year among the ancient people was always considered to be a symbol of life of man microcosm and life of universe macrocosm. Birth at the winter solstice, the beginning of the year. Adolescence, trials, and the conquest at the spring equinox. Adulthood, full-blown strength and power at the summer solstice, representing a period of initiation when the great renunciation is made, and then closing with the autumnal equinox, the period of great passing. Now on 23rd September, as we are reaching in few days, we have the autumnal equinox coming. Now this cycle of the entire year, these 4 posts or the 4 turning point actually of the year, likewise symbolizes captures or symbolizes the training of a chelaship. So if we were to consider the Egyptian initiation mysteries just as a reference in this context of the equinox, the upcoming equinox, we can look into the same, wherein in this diagram, if you see, these were the hieroglyphics which depicted these initiation ceremonies. And all these were basically connected with the pyramids. Pyramids being a very important centers of such rites and learning and knowledge and ancient mysteries. We all know that the pyramids in Egypt were very properly aligned with the constellation, especially with the Ursa Major and the others. And their openings, the openings to their shafts, were also aligned to the Orion belt and the Draconist belt. And we also know that these particular pyramids as per the recent discoveries and understanding of scientists and archaeologists, are actually were not made by the Egyptians as we know. They were actually made by even ancient civilizations, and the Egyptians just sort of owned them, inherited them, maintained them, and continued these ancient rites. A recent discovery also tells us last year this happened, that there is a very big, intricate labyrinth of caves, which is 5 to 10 times bigger than the actual pyramids underneath the pyramids, which is connecting at several locations. But it's very critical and very delicate for the archaeologists to excavate because the entire structure is very fragile. And this was uncovered by various means of science and technology, by ultrasound, by sending drones, by surveys and latest technology. And they found out this mesh-like structure, which is below the Giza Pyramid and the other main pyramids. So, in context of the importance of the equinox, let's see what the ancient Egyptians used to do. Here we see an image of the Giza Pyramid. On the left hand side, you can see there is a southern shaft, and this shaft is actually pointing to the Orion's belt. There is a 44-degree elevation here, and this straight goes to an area known as the King's Chamber. On the other side of King's Chamber, or at the entrance, there is again a shaft which goes straight directly and points to the constellation of Draconis, or to Thuban, which is at the elevation of 31 degrees. Now, below the King's Chamber, there is another chamber which is known as the Queen's Chamber. And below the Queen's Chamber, there is a small path which is known as the well shaft. And after that, you see the pit. Pit is at the lowest end. So when these initiation rites and similar rites were conducted, after the decision was made by the Hierophants, or the great masters, that the candidate was ready to be initiated, he was led into the pyramid. Down the descending passage, he entered into the pit. So basically, he got into this area, the pit. Now the pit is cut into solid rock, and deep under the great pyramid, it's at the very lowest possible region, and this region was full of dust, vermin, debris, and bats. Symbolically, this pit represents the infernal region, and it is full of karma, full of lust, gratification. As a result, this is kind of a hell, a pain, suffering, misery, death, rebirth, and it is like man is stuck in this region and comes again and again in the cycle of necessity, in the cycle of birth and rebirth, the valley of thorns and tears. And so here the neophyte has to conquer the lower karma, or rather the karma manas. If the neophyte steps out of the pit from here, and his left hand, just imagine you climbing from here, so your left hand finds in the wall of the descending passage an opening to a very narrow tunnel. This is a very narrow tunnel, which the Egyptologists have named as a well shaft. And this well shaft also is cut through a solid rock, but it's a very smooth wall and very steep. And it's almost 90 degrees, so you can see how steep it is. So it's very difficult for the neophyte to climb through. And he uses his hands, knees, toes, elbows, hips somehow to move up, but his body weight sort of drags him down again and again. So he bleeds, aches, and since it's a very narrow passage, a very narrow tunnel, the amount of oxygen is also very less. So breathing is very laborious. Now halfway, so when you reach here, this is the halfway up the tunnel, the ascent sort of ceases, the 90-degree ceases, and you have like this 45-degree angle here. So what happens is that the well shaft becomes less steep, and then the neophyte can move ahead much faster. Finally, at the end of the tunnel, the passage is enclosed with rectangular sort of stones. These are rectangular stones here. And this sort of provides him kind of a groove, kind of a support. And he also sees a torchlight from the Hierophant who's trying to help from above. And if the neophyte puts in some more effort from this area, he can move on to the Queen's chamber. Now, the thing is that if the neophyte decides to move in the Queen's chamber, then that means he is deciding to be initiated into the lesser mysteries. Else he has to actually climb this area and go to the king's chamber, which is another level of laborious climb, and a final higher level of initiation would take place. And here the neophyte was placed in an empty sarcophagus in the pyramid. So it's kind of a coffin. Even after reaching here, you are put in a coffin, and then the rites basically take place. So basically, there's a rite of death in one way. Now, the initiates of lesser mysteries who go into the queen's chamber, they are known as mastai or the veiled. And seeing what they see is actually a perception through a mist, through a veil, with the eyes closed. That's why they are the mastai. But the ones who reach the king's chamber and learn the real secrets after initiation, they become the initiates of the seers of the greater mysteries, and they were known as the epopta. So here we see how important the entire pyramid is, and similarly all the structures which we saw initially are connected and concerned with these similar rites, and since ancient days this has been passing on and maintained, and definitely now we can get the idea of how important these astronomical events are and how they are connected with man. Now, further to understand much better, let's see what HPB says in this context. So exactly in this context, HPV says that this self, the highest, the one, the universal, was symbolized on the plane of mortals by the sun, its life-giving effulgence being in its turn the emblem of soul, killing the terrestrial passions which have ever been an impediment to the reunion of the unit self with the all self, hence the allegorical mystery. It was enacted by the sons of fire, mist, and of light. The second son appeared as put on his trial Vishwakarman, the Hierophant, cutting off 7 of his beams and replacing them with a crown of brambles, when the sun became Vikartana, shorn of his beams or rays. After that, the sun, enacted by a neophyte ready to be initiated, was made to descend into Patala. And this is same as the pit we saw in the nether regions on a trial of Tantalus. Coming out of it triumphant, he emerged from this region of lust and iniquity to re-become Karma Shakshan, witness of the karma of men, and arose once more triumphant in all the glory of his regeneration as Graha Raja, the king of the constellation, and was addressed as Gavestiman, repossessed of his race. So you see how important uh, all this is. But the question comes to mind is how again sun is connected with all these mysteries. Initially, we saw the sun being the center of the entire solar system. Then there is our sun, which may be going around another center, could be another sun, and the whole cosmos. If you see the diagram by the provided by NASA, the entire thing is again going around something else which is akin to the sun, some center. So why is this center important, and why is the central sun important? In this context, what HPV says is the central sun causes Fohath to collect primordial dust in the form of balls to impel them to move in converging lines and finally to approach each other and aggregate. Fire concealed in the central spiritual sun is spoken of as triple metaphysically, while the fire of the manifested cosmos is septenary. Throughout both the universe and our solar system, the fire or knowledge burns up all action on the plane of illusion, says the commentary. Therefore, those who have acquired it are emancipated and are called the fires. And this we can relate to the initiates also. The real substance of the concealed sun is a nucleus of mother substance. It is the heart and the matrix of all the living and existing forces in our solar system. So in these mysteries, you are actually aligning yourself with the heart and the matrix of the universe. So your matrix and heart is aligning with the matrix and heart of the universe. And then you are aligning yourself with all living and all existing forces in the solar system. It is the kernel from which proceed to spread on their cyclic journey all the powers that set in action the atoms in their functional duties and focus within which they again meet in their seventh essence every 11th year. So science also agrees that the sun has a 11 and a half year cycle in which it pumps out cosmic rays, solar flares increase and solar flares decrease. So sun is like a heart of the solar system, and then it goes around another center which could be the heart of that sun, which goes around another center and so on and so forth. So even if we see from that perspective, analogy and correspondence, the human heart is also like a sun for us, and our whole system is revolving around that. He who tells thee he has seen the sun laugh at him, as if he had said that the sun moves really onwards on his diurnal path. So next, we see that the sun has seven beings, the seven holy ones, the seven born from the inherent power in the matrix of mother substance. It is they who send the seven principal forces called rays, which at the beginning of Pralaya will center into the seven new suns for the next Manvantara. The energy from which they spring into conscious existence in every sun is what some people call Vishnu, which is the breath of absoluteness. And hence we can also realize the symbolism of Vishnu, the mysteries about Vishnu, how they are important and how they are connected with the sun and the central sun and so on and so forth. And finally, this brings us to the point which HPV mentioned, secret doctrine, that sun is the center of all, and that's why sun is the greatest magnet of all in one way. Now, regarding the initiatory cycle, HPV says, and she gives some hints here, very interesting, we'll just touch upon that. She says in SD that the cycle of initiation was a reproduction in miniature of that great series of cosmic changes to which astronomers have given the name of tropical or sidereal year. Just as at the close of the cycle of the sidereal year, 25,868 years. Now see, initially we calculated that the zodiac belt is moving at a rate of 1 degree in 72 years. That means 360 degrees means 72 into 360, and we got the number of 25,920. But here we are short, and it is 868 as per HP. So maybe this could be correct, but maybe since the tilt of the earth varies from 22 to 24 degrees and odd minutes, that means that there could be changes in this calculation. But we never know, because this particular year or this particular number of years this forms the basis of calculation of various other cycles. And then she says that the heavenly bodies return to the same relative positions as they occupied at its outset, which we saw in the zodiac belt. So, at the close of the cycle of initiation, the inner man has regained the pristine state of divine purity and knowledge from which he set out on his cycle of terrestrial incarnation. See how the universe and life of man is all interconnected, and it's like descending and then ascending, descending and ascending on a higher, and then descending and ascending on a higher. And if we correlate this with the spiral movement which we initially saw, we may get more insights. Elsewhere, in explaining the esoteric significance of baptism by water and baptism by fire, HPV talks about um, uh, the cycle of initiation, where she says water represented the first and lower steps toward purification, while trials connected with fire came last. Water could regenerate the body of matter, fire alone that of the inner spiritual man. So, in this way, we get a pretty good idea how important the entire year is. In fact, how important the entire day is and every moment is. Because either we are aligning ourselves to the astronomical events and generating harmony. Because we should also remember that all these astronomical events and even astrology for that matter, these all represent like a clockwork the uh, pointers to different combinations of cycles, and they are the fate of man is not written in rock. These astronomical events are just indicators like a clock. So you have the small hand of the clock and the big hand of the clock, which is giving you the exact hour. And similarly, this heavenly clock made of these zodiacal belt and cycles of the planetary movements, cycles of sun and moon, and then in all of the mix, you have the asteroids coming in, the meteoritic showers coming in. All these have significance, and all are having impact on the sevenfold man, and sevenfold man having impact on them. So if we are able to harmonize the sevenfold man with the astronomical, then we are in harmony with nature and with all. And that's the message of the ancients, that we need to learn these messages which they have captured in all these ancient monuments, temples, sites for the sacred rituals. They have this message that man, know thyself. You need to harmonize yourself with the macrocosm. You need to understand that you are the copy of the macrocosm and live in harmony with the whole using these laws, and all these are given to us. In fact, the entire secret doctrine, if we are trying to read between the lines and contemplate, it will open up, and all these mysteries are connected with each other. Just as we saw the Egyptian god Thoth. The Egyptian god Thoth itself is very mysterious. And if you see how Thoth was created in the Egyptian stories, it's exactly like how Ganesha of India is there. And we know Ganesha is connected, he is the Lord of Numbers. And similarly, Thoth is Lord of Numbers. And they are all connected with scribes, the Lipikas. And Lipikas are directly connected with our karma. So you see how the connection goes about. So, and then we also saw about Vishnu. So this we can connect to the Trimurti, we can also connect to the Mahavishnu, and we can see the bigger picture emerging. And then Thought is connected to Hermes. Thought Hermes. Hermes is again connected to Buddha, Buddhi. So all these then get connected. And for each one of us, then it becomes important to use these dots and connect these dots and try to find out the actual meaning behind it. and then each one of us will find the actual occult significance behind these things. So friends, we have 10 minutes or so. We will take some